Yes, we are back with another SNL Stats Roundtable podcast, and I am so excited to get into everything from this week's show with Timothée Chalamet and Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band. Before we do, if you haven't checked out last week's show, you missed a great panel with, frankly, some really strong opinions about the Morgan Wallen party sketch and many things that happened last week. But it led to some great conversation that carried over into social media. And, that's what the show is all about. It's about communicating with the SNL community and getting their opinions about different sketches. And that panel was with Liz Shannon Miller from Collider, SNL In Review and Entertainment Weekly's Andy Hogland, and superfan Bill Kenny. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube or any podcatcher to never miss an episode. But for now, let's turn to tonight's panel. First up, you know him from the SNL Nerds podcast. He joined us in the preseason and for our Adele show. Darin Patterson, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, John. Thanks for having me. Third time's a charm.
Yeah, you're getting closer. So
I'll get there.
Yeah, happy to have you back, Darin. And we had your buddy John on for one episode as well. So really, the nerds keep coming on.
That's all right. The nerds will never stop.
Yeah.
Keep on coming.
Next up, he is a frequent contributor to the SNL Reddit, including the production of his own SNL at Home edition and one of the many Andrews that appears on this podcast. Andrew Haynes, how are you doing?
I'm well. Glad to be back. Good to be back with you and Darin again. Very excited to hear from Mr. Fox today.
Yeah. Well, there you go. It is time to actually introduce somebody who I've been trying to get onto the podcast for weeks now. I'm so thrilled to have him on. He is the senior editor and writer for New York Magazine and Vulture, as well as the host of the Good One podcast, where he interviews comedians, including current SNL cast members like Cecily Strong and Edie Bryant, SNL alumni like Colin Quinn, Hannibal Buress, Jenny Slate, Seth Meyers, so many more. Jesse, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
Oh, good. Thank you for having me. First time's the charm, as they say. I'm really happy to do this. I love talking about SNL more than really anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the one thing that I like to do when I have somebody new join us on the podcast is kind of, give their history with SNL and how you got into the show. So tell the listeners a little bit about your experience with SNL and really the comedy scene.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's like the true SNL diehards who like watched, like their entire family watched it growing up and then they just sort of inherited it. Where like I was in a Living Color household, and that's like what we watched as a sketch family. And then so it was mainly like the best of DVDs or VHSs for a while. And then I feel like when Will Ferrell joined, that's when I started developing my own interest. Then like I remember Tracy Morgan was really big, and then I will say like I became really, really into SNL. Like when Seth Meyers started, I feel like the sensibility of the show was closer to mine, and I really, really liked it. Like Will Forte and all those guys. And then when Bobby Moynihan got cast, he was like a guy that I already knew from comedy. And I was like, oh, I get it now. Like, this is like, I understand the world in which people got into the show. And like I wrote this piece a few years ago about how SNL is like sports and how you can watch it like sports. And that was the moment where that really clicked. Where you're like, he was in the farm league and now he's pulled up. And sort of the idea of following SNL really took over. And that's like what a lot of my passion is. Like, I do like watching the show and I do like the sketches, but I love following the show more than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you are the perfect guest for this podcast because that's exactly what we love to talk about, which is basically all these comedians and impressionists are coming from, these comedy clubs. That's really like the double A of the farm team. And then you get to SNL and that's kind of like your triple A. Yeah. And, that's right before you hit it big and you get go onto these, huge careers or not. And for us at SNL Stats, we like to kind of make predictions and evaluate and kind of look at the macro of the ins and outs of different cast members to see if potentially they may succeed on or off the show and how they're doing. So it's really, really cool to have you. I would also like to ask you a little bit about, you said that you write some articles about SNL and you do have a comedy podcast. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about what you do on more of a day-to-day?
Yeah, sure. So I have a podcast called Good One. It's broadly a podcast about jokes, but I define jokes to mean a unit of comedy. So it's like a full routine, or in the case of sketch comedy, it's a sketch. Or in the case of SNL, often it's one character, right? So I think of a character as a unit. So when I had Cecily on, we talked about Janine Pirro. So we're going through the different iterations of that. Or when I had Keenan on, we talked about Ball, whatever his name is. Now he's not even not LaMelo Ball, LeVar. I was like, who's the actor?
Oh yeah, okay.
LeVar Ball. So we talked about that, or like, you know, when Seth was on, we talked about Juan likes rice and chicken, but like we also talked about him as relations to be an SNL guy, because I've interviewed Seth more than I've interviewed anyone in my entire career. Partly because I think Seth and I view SNL in a similar way. Seth is like a really big SNL fan still. Like every time we talk, he's like, "Did you watch SNL last week?" So it's tends to be the focus, where I used to write about it more when more of my time was spent writing, but now it's interviews. And I interview Lauren this year.
So I want to get into that. For sure.
I didn't know when I was like, what else did I do SNL related? It's like, oh yeah, I talked to the guy. But yeah, so it's like on the podcast, it's really just you use the character as a sketch as a sort of gateway to get a better sense of who the person is as a comedy performer or writer, and just sort of a person in general. So even if you look at a difference between like the 80 Bryant episode and the Cecily Strong episode, which were like a couple weeks apart, you saw completely different approaches to the show, different approaches of where they are in their time in the show, but also similarities of their like both kind of were thinking of leaving maybe. And then once the pandemic hit, they're like, I don't want to leave on a non-regular season, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just like, I love doing the SNL episodes probably the most because one, they're really easy to prepare for because you sort of know exactly what you're going to be talking about. It's like, you know, the weeks are going to be like, what happened on Monday? What happened on Tuesday? What happened on Wednesday? What happened on Thursday, Friday, Saturday? And then you also sort of like know the idea of like how an SNL career blossoms in a similar way. So, and everyone knows that they sort of like have to think about their legacy in a way that like a person who's just been a comedian doesn't have to think about it, because like SNL demands you to realize you're part of history. Like it's, and I don't think I've talked to any cast member who's not aware of that and does not think about that a lot.
Yeah. For sure. And it's really important that as an SNL community that we evaluate, you know, episode by episode a lot, you know, to see, you know, was this a good one? Was this a bad one? But mostly, you know, to kind of look at where this episode fits in the grand scheme of things and where each cast member fits in the grand scheme of a career of somebody who was on SNL. So we're going to get into, you know, a little bit more detail about this past week. But, you know, what I always like to do as a first segment on our show is do a little bit of a State of the Union. Mm-hmm. So Darin, I'll bring you in. You know, we haven't heard from you since I think the Adele episode. So tell me a little bit about where you're at with SNL, you know, coming back for these 3 episodes.
Right now, I think we're, you know, coming back into these 3 episodes, I think we're kind of in a good place with SNL, or I'm in a good place with it. Last week's episode, I wasn't too crazy about. I think, you know, if you listen to the, you know, what I talked about it on my podcast, it was a little bit kind of shaky. Because I guess maybe, you know, because they were coming off of vacation or whatever. And for some reason, I don't think the audience of that show was very good. Like, you know, it's like some of the sketches weren't great, but they had a few good moments in there. And even those good moments, the audience really wasn't giving it up for it. So I was like, I don't know, I think this audience was kind of not great. But for this show, the Timothée Chalamet show, I thought it was way better. I thought the audience was way better. And there were like a handful of sketches that I really liked that I thought were really strong. So, I mean, I'm not sure. I'm hoping that speaks well for for next week's episode, the final episode of 2020. But like so far, I think we're in a good place.
Yeah, I agree. I was super impressed with what they did this past week, and I want to get into that a little bit more. But for me, it's been pretty great these last couple episodes, and hopefully going into the mid-season finale. Haynes, what about you? I mean, we haven't heard from you since our superfan panel a few weeks ago. I know that I thought of you guys right away when I saw the massive head wound Harry appear in the monologue. So how have you felt about these past couple episodes and where we're at in the middle of the season?
Well, you know, I wasn't knocked off my feet by the last episode either. Maybe partly because it contained the worst SNL sketch in like the last decade, which was the Wallen apology. Was to me was so brutally awkward and stupid and forced.
We can't do this again.
Okay. All right. That's fair enough. But no, that episode didn't shine for me. This week really did, and so I'm looking forward to moving on to that segment where we get to talk about this. I won't go into too much detail now, but I do feel like it was maybe the most complete episode of the year from top to bottom. As far as the season so far, I mean, we've seen some great stuff. The Chappelle monologue, I feel like, is one that we'll remember for a very, very long time. The Jack White musical performances were top notch. I think we've seen some interesting things. The Bill Burr monologue pushed some boundaries, and I'm giving that a very close runner-up to Chappelle's monologue. And we've got guys like Chris Rock and John Mulaney too. So these are tough. These are tough acts to beat, but we've seen some good stuff.
Yeah, I think so. Especially for the expectations coming into season 46. So. Yes, I want to talk to you about this because this is a conversation that I've wanted to have since I started this podcast earlier this season, which was I knew that season 46 was always going to be special for, maybe not the best reasons, but because this is a season that's happening in the middle of a pandemic and the decision to go back into 8H. And, we've been talking about this since your article came out before when you talked to Lauren in the preseason, basically, what went into the decision to bring them back there and how the season was going to look. So I wanted to know if you can get a little bit into your conversation with Lauren and have things looked the way you thought they would since your conversation with him.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to him and knew nothing. So it's really hard to prepare when you're just like, just tell me what SNL is going to look like this season. And the few things he prepared us for as the sort of people who've read the article is there'd be an audience. It'd be not that many, but there'll be an amount that they'll test. And at that point, it didn't even seem like they figured out the details, but it seemed like they were going to figure out how to test an amount of them in an appropriate amount. And I don't know where they've now settled, but it seems like you have to have multiple tests before they come, then they test again. There was the stuff earlier this season where they paid the audience, so they counted as actors. I don't know if they're still doing that. And they're like, we're testing everyone constantly in terms of like the people that were working on the show. And you also see certain things about how many people could be on a set at one time without a mask on, like all little things like that. Especially earlier in the season, you saw that a lot, and it was really, as a person who knew, it's kind of disconcerting. There'd be like sketches where a full person left in the middle, and then there was new characters. And the other thing he prepared for were people were going to be in and out, that there were going to be new cast members, and different cast members were going to be filming the projects they were supposed to film this summer. And he's Lauren, so he's sort of like Lauren about it. And you don't know, you just don't know what it's going to be. But
you said something super interesting, if you don't mind, if I just delve a little bit deeper on that. You said that there are sketches where cast members are not potentially allowed to be on stage for a certain amount of time, so they have to actually switch people in and out.
Yeah, it seems like there was an amount of people allowed to be on a set, in a set without a mask on at a given time, at least at the beginning of the season. And there was, I think it was like a mafia sketch where they just replaced somebody. So there was a sketch with somebody, and then one of the people left, and then a new person joined the sketch as if they were there the whole time. And then they addressed that person because it was their beat in the sketch. And I have to assume that was a COVID thing because it wasn't played for a laugh. That's sort of like, now there's a new person here, which is also weird which means maybe they wrote it earlier than realized the numbers problem. I only noticed that once, but I think in general, there are little stuff like that of how many people can be in given spaces at an amount of time.
It's so fascinating, though. I remember that. I remember thinking, where did he come from? Whoever it was, I think that popped in on.
I think that was the Bill Burr.
Yeah, because it was about how like people in the mafia can't use slurs or whatever. The joke was.
And that's the one where like Alex Moffat left, and then Punky Johnson came in to replace him.
So
that's fascinating.
There are little things like that. That was the only time I really noticed it. But I think generally, probably if you paid attention, of like, there's not been the like all the kids in the pool type of sketch of like we're gonna have everyone and everyone's gonna be in the sketch, which is one the hardest thing for this show to write, but often a thing they do write because it's fun to see everybody. It's like that sketch where it's like Bobby Moynihan and Cecily Strong yelled at everybody when they were quitting. Like I think of that as a definitive like, oh, we figured out a way to get every single person on cast in a room together. But you haven't seen those because
I would say the one exception would probably be the Mulaney musical
thing. But even that, I guess also some people were wearing masks, right? I wonder if that allowed them to get through it, right? Because I'd have to see. I mean, like it, and maybe they've gotten better at it, or maybe they figured out like ultimately if you're testing these people as much as they now are. I think also earlier in the season, in general, testing, rapid testing, there were less tests around. People were testing less frequently. It was more expensive to do so many tests. This is not an SNL fact, but I remember we did a story about testing in Hollywood sets, and it was like tens of thousands of dollars of their budget went to testing. So I imagine they did not want to have to spend that much money. So there may be certain things that did that. And I think once they got an understanding of what the show would look like with testing and with a smaller audience, so 4 or 5 episodes in, I felt like the show, even though they should have been incredibly tired, the show found a later rhythm in those 5th or 6th episode of that crazy stretch.
Yeah, I agree that all this is so interesting. So thank you for telling us. Yeah,
because he was the one. He said he's like, oh, we're gonna do as many episodes until the election's over, and I believe that was like I don't know if the cast was totally sure of that. There are certain things that like he broke to me. I think like Anna Dresden, the news that she was going to be head writer wasn't necessarily things that they told everyone about, or like little things like that. And the other thing that he talked about was that people were going to be missing episodes, and it wasn't going to be that big of a deal. He didn't necessarily like it's not going to be a big deal. He just sort of like, it's like people will be missing episodes, but they'll be in and out, and they'll come back midweek and all that stuff, or they'll do green screen. And I think that has been, I don't know, I wouldn't say it's the story of the season. The story of the season is that they've been doing it, but like, if it's like, oh, like, well, Cecily missed the first 6 episodes for the most part, and now 80's gone. Keenan and Chris Redd, I guess, are shooting their show.
Yeah, they're doing the Keenan show.
So you're just like,
can I just ask a question? Does Lorne talk about anything in any way other than pure nonchalance? Like every time people ask him about stuff, it's, oh, I don't know, little this, little that. So relaxed all the time.
He talks in the way he does. When you're on the phone with him, two things that you notice that is one, this guy's like much more of like a cut up than I think people think of him. Like he wasn't like cracking tons of jokes, but he was like laughing and being kind of more of a person who was a comedy writer for a lot of his life. So there's that. But yeah, he talks in this way that you're like, if you were a new SNL staff member, you'd be petrified because you don't totally know exactly what he's saying, but you're near it. He's sort of talking in these circles, and you sort of like try to get, and it's fascinating because you're like, this is the guy. This is the thing. Yeah. He's talking the way that we've heard he talks.
Haynes, I think of the sketch where like Tom Green is in the bathtub with him. And that's where I picture he's just like totally relaxed all the time, just talking about whatever.
Who wouldn't be relaxed in a bathtub with Tom Green?
Yeah, of course. Okay, well, I mean, Jesse, thank you for letting us know about all that, because it really is like I said, I like to look at the macro of things, and I do think you're right. The story of the season is that the season is happening, but certainly there are these like underlying subplots, including the fact that we'll talk about the cast a little bit later on, but including the fact that 3 of our main cast is not there. and we'll see what happens this week. But we have, a former cast member obviously hosting coming up next week, so we'll see who comes back for that. But it's certainly, as far as Chalamet's episode was concerned, it certainly left open opportunities for some of our featured players, which was really nice to see. So we'll talk about all that. But let's kind of start off with the episode, start right at the beginning. And Darin, I want to get your overall thoughts on Shalamé. If people want to hear more detail about Darin's thoughts, obviously definitely check out the SNL Nerds podcast that he did this past week. But just to start off, I mean, the cold open for me, Darin, was probably maybe not in terms of the quality of the sketch was the best this season, but just the overall pacing of the episode, the way it started, it really felt like SNL finally. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that how you felt?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I felt with the cold open, it definitely, like you said, it felt like the old SNL. I mean, like the two things that probably added to that feeling that helped the cold open immensely that we haven't seen in a while are, A, the cold open was only like 5.5 minutes. It was like so much shorter, and it's so much better for it. And B, no celebrity cameos. It's the actual cast in the cold open. And like that made such a world of difference to me. And I'll admit, like, the cold open wasn't, as far as, jokes and everything, it wasn't the best. But I mean, the fact that it was like shorter and more sort of compact, and it was just the cast just kind of showing what they can do. And, it had its moments here and there. I mean, it's always good to see Kate play yet another male role. But I mean, as far as cold open goes, I thought it was like a great improvement over everything we've seen, especially in the past with the election year, everything leading up to the election. This was like a refreshing change of pace.
Yeah. Haynes, what about you? What do you think?
I thought it was a good cold open. I do think, I still actually haven't Googled what Timothée Chalamet did to get famous. I honestly don't know. I'm not kidding. I seriously don't know. But, he seems like a nice guy.
I'm going to have to kick you off the podcast. I'm going to have a million people contacting me about you.
Got the Shalamaniacs coming after you.
But he was fantastic as a host. He was in many sketches, close to all of them. He was in a ton of them. And the show, like I said, top to bottom, was maybe the most complete episode of the season. There wasn't a single sketch that didn't at least hit the way it was supposed to. I'm not saying that every sketch was an all-time classic or anything like that, but even the ones that seemed, not to be the best ones of the episode, they got plenty of laughs out of me. I never was bored. Nothing ever was cringy or awkward. I don't remember the audience being silent at times when there should be laughs. So to talk about the cold open, I even like the first joke they started out with, the indoor man with an outdoor name. Perhaps, there's a lot of great laughs in this episode. So this is not my favorite laugh, but perhaps my favorite moment on a personal note. Heidi talking about or Dr. Burks talking about how the vaccine in North Carolina will be vinegar-based. That is very important to North Carolina people, our personal debate over barbecue. That's why I'm wearing this shirt tonight. This is my plug for the evening. The Skylight Inn in Ada, North Carolina is the best barbecue in the world. That's not a joke. It's a statement of fact. And
not a sponsor.
Maybe. So the cold open was fun. Cold open was fun. And Heidi, she kind of dominated this episode, her and Beck did. So she exploded in the cold open and then was fantastic throughout the rest of the episode. So good cold open all around, I think.
Yeah, so that's definitely true. I think also just for the people who are counting out there for the live from New York from this week. So we had another Kate live from New York. That is her 61st time. She stays in second place. She's now 16 behind Hammond. I know we're slowly creeping towards probably the end of Kate's time on SNL, but it'll be interesting to follow where she ends up at least prior to her leaving the show. And then Heidi saying SNL 7th time, tied with Garrett Morris, Billy Crystal, Seth Meyers, Tina Fey, and Larry David. underrated. So really, really great for Heidi. It's a big deal when everyone, when someone says it. So I like to point that out. Jesse, let's go over to you. So tell me a little bit about your thoughts about the cold open and the overall pacing of this episode.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree that ultimately I think almost every cold open's not that good compared to the rest of the show. I think for a variety of reasons, but also just like the nature of how news moves, I think it's not my favorite part ever. So anytime it's short, it's great. It's like the best ever is when they don't do politics. I think like when they do like a regular sketch there that's politics adjacent enough that they can do it, it's for the best. So the fact that it was short and also the monologue was not a super long monologue made it so like, oh, it can actually sort of like be a regular SNL episode opposed to it's like 2 sketches and we're already a weekend update. It's like 2 sketches, music, weekend update. And you're like, where did this show go? Like there's nothing. And I thought it was also really funny how much taller Heidi is than Kate. I think it's a very funny sight gag. I think it worked. You're just like, it's like, I think Kate was a perfect cast for Fauci because she's short and you're like, that person's little. And then Heidi's so tall. And that was enough, like ultimately that's what a lot of the sketch was built on was that dynamic. Yeah. And I agree. It's like Heidi was in a lot of the show. I mean, because of the nature of who's been gone, her and Ego have been the people that have like picked up the most. And so it's just like, and like, I think she's completely capable of it. I think she's a very talented sketch performer. So I'm happy to be like, oh, now she's like in these. I don't know who else would have played this part anyway, so it makes sense. But
Jesse, what has been your thoughts on the cold opens in general and the politics? So far we were in election season, and I'm curious, your thoughts about the Maya Rudolph and Jim Carrey of it all, because we haven't really heard those from you.
Yeah, I think Jim's impression doesn't make any sense. That I don't know what the point of it is yet. Like I really was hoping for, when I talked to Lauren, he goes, I keep on fighting not just to do the impression, but he's just like, like Jim has a take and blah blah. He talked to so I was like, oh, he already has a take. So that means
what is that take? I think we're still trying to figure it out.
Like everyone, I'm like, is his take? Like this is my guess. The closest guess I have, which is Jim's take is, look, Biden's boring, so we'll just use him as a surrogate for me to just do other things. I don't know, like, I'm not like a big fan of that take, but I guess that is the closest to a cohesiveness, because it's felt just sort of like arbitrary, but maybe that's what the thing is. But that is so, why would that be the thing? That is like nothing to, there's no relationship to Biden whatsoever. So then you'd have these sketches where it's like, Alex Trump is as phoned in as it has been for a bit now. I can't, like, at least 2 seasons maybe. And then you have Biden, who's not, it's like nothing. You're having no comedy happening from there. And then they're so long. So it's a perfect mix of not what you'd want from a sketch. I think Maya is good at Kamala, partly because they have a very similar voice as is. Like, Kamala's talking voice is a very similar voice to Maya's talking voice. But like even her, because clearly that's like the most fun of the impressions, they would just have her come in ways that was not organic. And I don't know. I think no one wanted it. No one wanted them to be doing those sketches. I don't know. I always feel bad. Like I feel like
we want the hot takes. That's what we want.
Well, I just feel bad that like it had. I don't know. Like in 2016, I feel like the run up was pretty good. Like I feel like the first iteration of Trump running for president stuff was pretty good. And then it's just been, no one wants it to happening. I feel like I'm quoting myself here, so I don't want people to be like he's using his line. I want to know that it got to a pace where it's like an unhappy couple having sex on Valentine's Day, where it's like no one wants to do it, but like there's clearly a sense of obligation that like, well, we do the cold opens and this guy's crazy. So here's what he said and then we just do it. And it takes so much time. Like if they were just short, like if it's just sort of like them saying hello, and then like the monologue was shorter, then who cares? But they take so much time from when good stuff could be happening.
Yeah. And here's the thing. It's like, what we're having with Biden, and this is something that I believe we've spoken about in previous podcasts, is that what's happening with Biden in terms of his SNL, history, it's very similar to the Obama thing, where, when Fred Armisen and Jay Farrow were doing Obama, they didn't really have a great take on Obama. They just kind of had, Obama's like a really normal, cool guy, and like craziness was happening around him. So they were able to kind of play off of that. And so you would have these like I would think that the best Obama cold open or Obama sketch in the era that he was president was probably like The Rock Obama.
Yeah, of course.
Where, he just like gets all crazy and angry. And I almost think that is the same take that should have been happening with Biden, where is that like there's this like lunatic at the other podium, and Jim Carrey is supposed to be like getting Biden to like keep it together, but he just like can't keep himself from like yelling out obscenities at the Trump of it. And that to me was like, it was like kind of like this obvious in front of you take. And instead they took this other route, which was like, let's just lay out every single thing that Jim Carrey can possibly do. And let's just, have him do that on SNL. Now, for people who are listening, they're like, okay, I came to listen to you talk about Timothée Chalamet. Why are you talking about Jim Carrey's Biden? He wasn't even on this episode. But what I will say is that we are headed towards a mid-season finale, and I would be stunned if you don't see it this coming week as part of a theme of the season. So I would like to at least have the conversation for the next few minutes about what we could do moving forward, because there's still a chance that they can correct some of these mistakes that I think they had at the start of the season. So as a panel, I would love to go around and kind of do like one recommendation that we could make for, the Jim Carrey and Maya Rudolph of it all, moving forward this season. So Darin, I'll start with you.
Wait, so you're just asking like what going forward, what they can do to?
Yeah, like I assume we're going to see it this week, and then obviously going into the new year with the inauguration and everything. Like we're really turning the chapter, moving forward towards the next stage of SNL covering politics. Is there something that we can like learn from the past, at least in the last 4 years, that we can move towards the future of where we see the politics on SNL?
I don't know. Well, I mean, I would say maybe. Well, I mean, for one thing, like I know, like always up top in the cold opens, they always talk about politics, but those cold opens are, as they were before, like way too long. Like some of the cold opens were like 8 minutes or 12 minutes, and you don't really need it to be that long, because I've also noticed like a lot of times later on in Weekend Update, they kind of make those same jokes about the things they already made in the cold open. So like you're hearing the same thing twice. So why do that? I would just like make the cold, like this cold open we had on this past show was pretty perfect. Just like 5 minutes, trim the fat, in, out, and then like all the other maybe jokes they had to make that were of a political nature, just made them in Weekend Update. I would do more of that. It's kind of, it'll be kind of tricky going forward now to, I guess, like who will they have to play Biden and Kamala? Because are they going to fly in Jim Carrey and Maya Rudolph every time they need it? Is it going to be like Alec Baldwin all over again, or are they going to have one of their cast members do it, like like they used to? I mean, I would like to see that too. Just have one of their cast members sort of develop an impression and just have them do it instead of just rely on stunt casting for the next 4 years or so.
Yeah, Jesse, it's my understanding also that they are locked in for the season, Jim and Maya.
Yeah, I imagine so. I think Maya will keep on doing Kamala because the vice president is not like a fairly relevant news story very often, so it's probably pretty easy to be like, oh, can you come by to do this? And I imagine she'll be there next week because it's Kristen, right? But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting if they keep on doing it and it doesn't work, if they're like, if he keeps on sticking around. If there's no juice in it and no one thinks it's good and no one likes him doing it. I remember, like, I can't think of tons, but I remember there was one cold open which was like about the Super Bowl, I think. And so it was just about the Super Bowl and it wasn't about politics. And I remember being like, this is one of my favorite cold opens ever. And just because it just like allowed Brian Tucker to write some sketch about sports. And I mean, I think the thing which is like Biden's not going to be making news in the way, right? I think presidential politics dominated because Trump was always the story and it always would change. So they couldn't really, it's going to slow down because Biden is Biden. And I think hopefully on that reason alone, they'll have more time to work on the cold opens, which, you know, they always try to write them last, but there was the whole thing about how they basically accepted that they can't even start them until Friday night. Like, and that was not a thing. Like, they used to maybe wait until Thursday, Friday, see what was happening. But like, truly, for the last 4 years, they've been writing them Friday night, Saturday morning, which is, you know, it's not a good recipe for not only good writing, but also like concise writing. You're like, it's like I couldn't write a short sketch, so I wrote a long one a little bit, which is like, instead of like thinking about the one take, let's just replay it and do a bunch of jokes on top of it, opposed to having like one angle, getting in and getting out.
Yeah, definitely. And Haynes, like, as a super fan, you know, somebody who loves the show, I would imagine that you were thrilled about the pacing of this cold open, like you said, and then the fact that this episode, like, to me, maybe the subject matter wasn't perfect, but or the quality of, you know, whatever. I mean, the quality of some of the jokes, whatever it is, but it's just, as far as the timing of the show, I like looked at my watch and I like couldn't believe that we had a 5-minute cold open, and I was like, yes, all right, like now I can get it. Like, there was just something about it that like hyped me up in a way that like a 10-minute cold open doesn't.
Yeah, you just don't get worn out. You can you see it and it's there, and then you can take a breath and move on. It felt like the other cold opens, and this is the problem with going third. I don't mean to be a cop out here, but like, yeah, they, you know, like Darin said, they need to be shorter, and like Jesse said, some of these issues we've dealt with may kind of disappear on their own. Even before the pandemic, I mean, Trump was just breaking so many norms that it's every week. I feel like they felt like they had to address it. Like, there's just the national news. You couldn't not pay attention to it. So SNL felt they had to address it. So yeah, I think some of that's going to trail off. Like you said, you know, this was a great cold open. 5 minutes is plenty of time, you know, and honestly, 3 minutes would be fine. Like, we need a handful of jokes, and we need somebody to say, live from New York, it's Saturday night. This, you know, we just want to open the episode and feel that moment and hear that, you know, saxophone, you know, come blaring in and start the night. Like, that's all we need. We definitely don't need 12 and 15-minute, you know, opens.
And here's my thing. I will double down on it by saying that if you do 5-minute cold opens or 5, 6, whatever it is, something short and sweet, a bunch of episodes in a row, you can hit me with a 10-minute cold open at a mid-season finale or a season finale, but it feels bigger and grander when you do it once in a while. But when it's happening every week, it doesn't have that same hit that you would be getting. So now it's like, if I didn't get that all season, but then next week for the Wig one, there was this like super amazing big cold open, I would be cool with that. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's what we're all trying to say, the same thing. So let's kind of move on from the politics, and let's talk a little bit more about the Shalamé episode. I want to go around the panel, tell me what you liked, what you didn't like, and we'll kind of get into the sketches a little bit more. So Darin, I'll start with you.
My favorite sketch, I got like 3 in mind that I really liked. Of course, the Lexus car commercial sketch, I think, is a classic. I mean, it was such a solid sketch from top to bottom. I mean, I'm a huge Heidi fan, and her character work was amazing. Beck, what he was doing was amazing, and just the way the sketch was just kept on elevating, and all the things that were going wrong, I thought was hilarious. It was a great concept and a great execution. I love Streeter Seidel and everything he writes. So the Lexus commercial I loved. The Dionne Warwick sketch I really liked a lot. I know. I really love how like they're kind of giving Ego more and more stuff to do this season, because like I know a lot of people have been saying that, you know, Kate might leave either maybe next week or at the end of the season, and people have kind of been looking for who's gonna replace Kate, and people are saying, well, it might be Heidi, it might be Chloe. I would throw the argument that like Ego is definitely like in the place where she might be the one to be the new like kind of breakout star. I mean, she does like really funny stuff. She's been able to carry these sketches, you know, really well. She has a really cool Dionne Warwick impression, and just like the way this Dionne Warwick sketch went, I didn't know where it was going to go, but then like I really enjoyed it. And The other sketch I really loved is the rap roundtable. You know, as somebody who kind of grew up on 80s and 90s rap and has a kind of a grumpy old man view of the SoundCloud, TikTok rappers of today, like the Tekashi 6ix9ine and Little Pump. Like that sketch really spoke to me. Like, you know, Questlove slapping the multicolored hair, Timothée Chalamet. That spoke to my heart. And and also I really love the fact that in this episode they gave Melissa Villaseñor a lot more to do. Like she was in 2 sketches and her Dolly Parton impression. My God, that thing is spot on. That was eerily accurate.
Okay.
So like those are things I loved.
Yeah, for sure. There was so much good here that I don't even know like where to start in our bag of goodies. But Haynes, like, do you want to talk about any of these 3 that Darin brought up, or is there one that you want to talk about a little bit more as well?
Listen, I enjoyed all of the ones that Darin talked about, particularly the Lexus, and that's you know, not the first time this season that we've seen Beck kind of in this failing role as a partner, you know, with the woman in his life, and you know, like when he's on her doorstep saying, you know, and she's finding out that he's like doing gay porn and stuff. So that, you know, this had some of that same kind of vibe. Yeah, that was a great sketch. I I was surprised at how much I laughed at that stupid Tiny Horse pre-tape, and particularly when you know, he's screaming for this horse to like run away and go home, and it's like it starts running, and then you know the camera pans out and it's only moved like 2 inches because it's so tiny, and so that was really good. And Christmas with the Ronas I thought was excellent. That was a fantastic sketch. I thought top to bottom, putting that at the front of the episode was a smart move. And then you know, Pete and Timothy did a lot together. They were paired together 3 times. So in the monologue and then the rap roundtable, they were yeeting all over the place. And then the Jets, the Sportsmax channel, which I still love stupid comedy, you know, and even though the whole Sportsmax things was just like Jets fans in denial, and really that wasn't even, to me, the bigger joke was just the emphasis on these stupid accents and how hard people were going in on this like idiotic, you know, idea of the average Jets fan. You know, I just laughed at everyone screaming in a you know, in a bad New York, New Jersey accent. So you know, I didn't hear a lot of talk about the Jets Sportsmax thing online, but to me, that's just like a good, funny sketch, and I don't think there was a bad one in the whole episode. I really don't.
Wow, that's really great to hear. One of the things that I do want to stop down on before we get to Jesse's like what he liked and didn't like is you guys both brought up this Lexus commercial, and then you know you have Tiny Horse as the next one. And I don't know if anybody else felt this way, but when SNL first started, the cast was so small, and this was, you know, something that I was advocating for a long time, is a smaller cast. But you would often see cast members play the same roles in multiple sketches. Like you would have, you know, your Phil Hartmans be the dads in every single sketch or something like that. And I don't know if anybody else was a little bit thrown off or it was just me, but I was watching the Lexus sketch and then Tiny Horse started, and it was like the same 3 people as the mom, the dad, and the son. And I like, this is something I want like, you know, cast members to continue to get more roles and stuff like that. But I was like, I was for half a second a little confused if I was living in the same world as the Lexus sketch. But you know, like that was just something I wanted to point out. And you know, the coronavirus family holiday one, that I want to get into in a little bit more detail. But Jesse, I'm going to let you go first. Tell me if you want to talk about that, or if there's another one you want to talk about.
I mean, I mean, at this point, we've named almost every single sketch in the show. And
no, I know. You know, the funny thing,
I would know. It's funny.
Yeah.
I will say this. I thought, just so we do touch on everything, I thought doing the holiday baking championship, I think we were done with this premise. I think the 2 were great, and then there's like, yeah, this is another beat, but I don't think there's like much more to mine from this reoccurring idea. Yeah, I mean, I think it was really exciting when you feel like this episode felt like what SNL might look like next season. and being like, oh, SNL next season will be good. Like it's the thing about watching the show, which is you're always a little bit worried it's going to be bad when everyone you love is gone. And then they figure out a way of making you feel hopeful towards the end of it. And partly because some of these people have been they've been doing a lot for a good amount of time, that they have been there for a while. But there was you see Heidi, so much of the show is like, oh yeah, she's going to be in most of the sketches. And it was nice to see the Dionne Warwick sketches. Is one, I love Ego. This felt like the first time she was really allowed to be silly in her way. It also felt like such a throwback to a 2002 sketch or whatever, where where the show was only talk shows. And so that was my favorite, probably. I don't know. I thought the Alexis was really good, but my biggest laugh was when I knew nothing about the type of people Pete and Timothy were parodying in the hip hop sketch. But when he starts singing in the rap song where he sings about my mom never loved me or whatever, I couldn't believe, I was not expecting that to happen. And that was the biggest laugh I had all episode.
I'm with you on that line. That line brought me down when I was rewatching it today. It hit me the same way. Hit me the same way. My mom doesn't love me anymore or something like that. It was so funny.
Yeah, what I will say about that is that there are certain weeks you could venture to ask the question, does Pete Davidson care as much about what he's putting into the show on a given week? But then you see weeks where he's doing stuff with a host that he really likes, and they're putting out good material, and it's this is the best version of Pete you could possibly ask for. Darin, do you agree with me?
Yeah, absolutely. I did notice that, like Andrew said, him and Shalamé were paired up quite a bit throughout this whole episode. And I also noticed that, at the times where Shalamé was in a sketch and Pete wasn't there was a few times where he seemed a little nervous and unsure of himself. But whenever Pete was there, he was way more relaxed and way more loose, and he was able to kind of go there a little bit more. So it seems maybe Pete was there to be his sort of support animal or something. But I mean, I also I'll admit, when Pete first was on SNL, I was kind of lukewarm on him. On some sketches, you could tell he wasn't that great. But I always loved Pete when he's just him, talking on the Weekend Update, behind the Weekend Update desk on his segments. When he's just talking and being himself, I think that's where he's the best. But once in a while, in sketches, he's really good. He can really kind of tune into the character. And you could tell it's probably because it's probably of characters that he knows really well, the rapper Guap Lord in the rap Roundtable sketch, or because he's from Staten Island, he probably knows Jets fans like that in the Sports Max sketch, or last week when he was Stu in the Eminem type of parody sketch. There are some roles where he knows it, he's more familiar with it, and in instances like that he does way better. So yeah, I'm turned around on Pete. I think he's oh yeah, he's got something.
Yeah,
kids going places.
It did feel like he's finally learned how to be in sketches. It took him 7 seasons or whatever, but he feels like a sketch actor finally.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, I kind of feel like I'm at a Thanksgiving dinner where it's just everything on the table looks good. There was just so much good in this episode where there's so much to talk about. And we don't usually have this. Usually we have 3 or 4 where we can really get into, but there was so much to talk about. And one of the ones that I wanted to talk about was this Arona family Christmas, which I was this concept is so genius. And I was thinking about it. I was why haven't they done this before? And then I remembered that they have done this before. And this was an Eddie Murphy sketch back in the Ebersol era where they did a herpes sketch, which was the exact same sketch. And this was, so I was looking at this and I was like, why is this so funny? And then I remembered it's because this is a similar concept to something that they've done in SNL before. Not to say that they don't repeat concepts all the time, but to me, right. I was just very I don't Haynes. I don't know if you saw the same thing when you were watching it, but it was just to me, it was that was the exact same sketch, saying all of that. The lines, the puns, everything was just so smart.
Love that sketch. And herpes actually showed up in this sketch too.
Right.
However many years later. Full of so many jokes. Him drinking the Purell and being too sanitized or whatever he was talking about. I loved the it was joke after joke, and that's the type of person I am. I think I like fast one-liners. Listen, I love all types of comedy. I love situational comedy, but I love if you can bring the jokes fast and quick. Like, I'm here for jokes, So the more you can pack in to every minute I'm watching, that's what I'm looking for. And this had joke after joke, and yeah, I think it was my favorite. I think it was my favorite sketch of the night.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is a good way to kind of like talk about all the sketches without getting into an exact sketch by sketch recap. Is that I don't know what your guys' expectations were for Shalamé, but when he showed up and he came on that stage, he was so confident that I felt good about whatever he was going to be thrown into that night. And I think that really helped the quality of all these sketches in a similar way to, I remember, he's my favorite host, so I do bring this up often, but like a pre-2003 or 4, Justin Timberlake, everybody was like, oh, this is like, he's a teeny bopper, like he's not going to be great on Saturday Night Live. And the guy comes in and he just like slays every sketch. And I really felt that about Chalamet, that this could be a repeat host coming back in the future. Like, I wouldn't be mad at all if he came back. Jeffrey, what do you think?
Yeah, I thought he was really good. I think he did. I should note, because I feel like we have Timothée Chalamet is a very famous actor, Andrew.
I know he's famous. I just don't know what for
acting in mostly prestige-y movies. He's in Lady Bird, and that was probably his big breakout. And then Call Me by Your Name, and then Little Women is sort of like. And then he was going to be in Dune. I assume this was the slot he was going to. They booked him because he was going to be in Dune, and then Dune was pushed. And he's like, I live in New York, so I'll host.
Okay,
anyway.
do you want to know what my guess was? My guess was that he was from Twilight.
No, he's too young for that. I think him and Pete are probably like young celebrity friends. It seemed like they had to. It's nice to have a peek of like, I think these people either are friendly because they're young, or they are actually friends because they're young. And I always think about how, like, I don't necessarily watch the show to see famous people be silly. Like, I don't mind it, but it's not like, obviously I'm much more interested in sketchcraft or whatever, but there are so clearly friends of mine who that's why they do watch the show. So it's like, I thought I think he was pretty good. He did Harry Styles and that type of move where you're like, let's like think of a tangential celebrity for the same. And then in the rap sketch, he did big, like if he did come back, I'd want him to do like bigger, sillier costumes, sillier voices and stuff. But I thought he was really good. And yeah, I think he was really comfortable. I mean, I like the Jason Bateman episode more than clearly you guys did. But the main thing is like, Jason Bateman is like a professional person. This guy is doing this like it's his job. And when it's your first time hosting, like it's Timothy and you're young, other than his goodbye, which I thought was so weird and awkward, I thought he was really good. Oh, I have one question. I feel like I've not had an opportunity to ask anyone this, and you guys might be the only people that would care. Do you know, how do you feel about the fact that now they do all monologues?
Well, they were having a problem where there was the ask a question to the audience monologue for a long time.
Yeah, now they make even non-stand-up comedians do stand-up. Like, he sat down, but he's essentially doing like stand-up.
I think you're asking the right people, because I think that we are like classic SNL fans, and this was the way that SNL was intended to be, was that the host would actually do a monologue. So I love it. Darin, what do you think?
Well, I didn't even notice that until you mentioned it, Jesse. But it has been mostly just kind of them talking and doing a monologue instead of like it'll be like partial monologue and then it goes on to like a smaller sketch type of thing
or a little song. Everyone just
or a song. I'm fine with it. Like, as long as it doesn't kind of trail off and become boring or anything. Like, I'm cool with it.
Yeah, and he landed jokes, which were like pretty good jokes, and he's able to the Mr. Met's daughter. That joke was really funny.
Right.
Sweet girl, big head.
Yeah.
Stacey Met. Yeah. So, to your last point, Jesse, I wonder if they, used like questions and stuff, more as a crutch when they aren't 100% sure that this kind of person is going to be able to roll through a 6-minute stand-up style monologue. Maybe if they got the vibe through the week, which wouldn't surprise me if they did based on his performance, that this is a guy who can just sell everything he does, and is going to be cool and confident, then he doesn't need something like that. I will state for the record, I have always been opposed to the dreaded song-a-log. I almost always hate them. Not always. Sometimes, like when Tina Fey did it with the new cast members, that was kind of fun. When J-Lo hosted, it was an obvious crutch, and the whole thing was one giant crutch, and that was ugly. I didn't like it. This. But if so far this season, I mean, look at the people who have hosted. I don't think the people who've hosted this year really need any help. We had several of them were stand-ups, so they're going to be naturals at that. And Adele was great. Issa Rae, is a comedian. So I don't know who would need any extra help. So I'm cool with it.
Yeah. Saying all that, Haynes, expect a musical monologue next week, probably. So. Yeah. Okay. So let's do you guys have any other sketches that you want to get into in a little bit more detail, or do you want to talk about the cast? Anybody?
We can talk.
Okay, so let's talk about the cast a little bit. So, Jesse, it's your first time here, so this is what I like to do. I have somebody who we work with. His name is Mike Murray. He puts together cast rankings every single week that takes into account both the amount of screen time somebody has in a given episode and the quality of their appearances. So if they appear as an A player in a sketch, they'll get bonus points. If they're only a voiceover, they won't get as many points. And he's also adjusted his ranking, which we're going to go over in a future podcast where we do a by the numbers. He gives extra points to people who have sketches before the weekend update, and also people who say live from New York. So I'm going to pull them off for you guys to take a look at. So we have our rankings from episode number 8 on the screen. And, ignoring the numbers for this week, which we'll get into in a future podcast, our top 5 cast members for the week, we have Beck Bennett at number 1, Kate McKinnon at number 2, Heidi Gardner at number 3, Colin Jost at number 4, and Ego at number 5. Pete would be number 6. And I believe that for those who are wondering, hey, Ego and Pete were in a lot of stuff. If you're, like I said, if you're after weekend update, some of that stuff doesn't count as much as people before weekend update. So I only pull this up just because I think it's an interesting jumping off point to start to have a conversation about, who we felt like stood out in this episode versus others. So Darin, let me start with you. What do you think about the cast in this episode?
I think there's a great cast in this episode. This is probably the most screen time probably Melissa has gotten maybe this whole season. Yeah, it's been a while. She was in the Rona family sketch. She was in the Dionne Warwick sketch, and she got her own segment, that weekend update part. So, anytime I get more Melissa Villaseñor in my life, I'm a happy camper. Like I said before, Ego.
By the way, I think you're right, Darin. I think this is the most screen time she's gotten the entire season.
It is. Yeah, I thought so. Yeah. Ego she's getting more and more screen time and getting more and more chances to show what she can do, which I'm all for. I think this season she's really kind of, come into her own. I'd love to see more Alex Moffat, really. He's kind of not been in as many things as I think he should be. He's really good. I kind of wish they kind of put him in more stuff. But so far so far so good. The newer cast members are getting little moments to shine here and there. I've seen Punky Johnson getting kind of more and more things here and there. Chloe's getting a good amount of screen time. So yeah, I think overall, it's a pretty great cast.
Yeah, for our audio listeners who can't see the rankings, our bottom 3 for this week were Alex, Kyle, and Bowen. So Alex is definitely near the bottom for another week in a row. Andrew, what are you thinking?
Well, I loved how much Heidi we got to see this episode. It does feel like Ego has really exploded kind of this season, and in particular this episode, her and Heidi both were in a lot of sketches. I thought, and I love to see that. I just want to echo, since this is the second time Darin's brought up the Dolly Parton impression. That was so good. I mean, Melissa's been good with impressions for a long time, but that one is pitch perfect. Like, it is fantastic. And I just love that she, I don't know if this is something that she brought to the table herself when she was working with the Weekend Update writers, or if this is, if she just wrote this in with her bit completely on her own. But throwing in that joke, about Dolly Parton saving a child and then saying, that really upset me because I was speeding up to hit that kid. Like, I love that. I love those kind of stupid jokes, those old kind of Buddy Hackett, Don Rickles, kind of punchlines. And so she was fantastic. But the ones that really, I think Beck kind of dominated the episode, but he's not new to getting plenty of screen time. We get to see his talents plenty, and he really was all over this episode. But it was good to see Heidi really shine this episode. And that's another thing that was just great about the episode in total. Without the political stuff, we lose all the cameos minus Questlove, and I didn't mind Questlove showing up. That's fun. But someone said, maybe it was you, John, at the beginning of this episode, it was the first one kind of all season that's really felt super SNL-y, like it was like a real SNL episode, and I loved it. And I don't know how all the jokes, I don't know how all the sketches work. That's very rare, even in a pure SNL style episode. In fact, maybe it's a little bit un-SNL that all the sketches worked. It's just so rare. But top to bottom, this was a great episode. We got to see a ton of great utility players. The new folks were getting a little bit. Punky and Lauren got a little bit more than Andrew Dismuke, because I feel like he only had about 5 lines in his 3 sketches. I'm not even sure if he actually had one during the Dionne Warwick, or if he just stood there waiting for her to stop singing. But overall, I loved the play that we got from the cast members in this episode.
Yeah, for sure. Jesse, what about you?
Yeah, I would say I did think, I think this is the first time Andrew Dismuke's got a laugh. I guess he did in that Michigan sketch, so he's done. But you're like, oh, he's now you feel a little bit more comfortable, and Lauren is clearly fitting in the role of not an extra, but a person who's in the sketch to fill out a sketch, and that's the role you tend to do in your first season. With Melissa, I thought it was really great. She feels really confident. I always find it weird on SNL, which is to get on SNL, you have to do really good impressions. But if you're really, really good at them, really good, obscenely good, you have to do bits where you make fun of how much you like doing impressions. It's a thing they did with Jay. They do it with Chloe. They do it with, it's so weird. It's you're all on SNL. You all do impressions. Why is it weird but clearly that is what's so bizarre and charming about Melissa. So I thought it worked, and it was nice that she was in regular sketches.
Wait, can we just touch on that for a second? Because I would love to get into a little bit more of a conversation about that. We see that somebody like Daryl Hammond has this insane longevity on the show, and he is an impressionist. And then you see other people who are amazing impressionists who have a very short career on the show because there's not much they can do beyond impressions. Yeah. And Jesse, let me go back to you. Do you think that there's somewhat of a sweet spot there that's if you're an impressionist, you also have to be able to do X, Y, and Z? Or is that the show is not putting these impressionists right now in the spotlight that they need to be?
Well, I think the biggest thing that Daryl Hammond had going for him is he's a white guy, and a lot of famous people are white guys. And there's an endless supply of them. And to be fair, when Daryl was doing it, he was allowed to not only play white guys, which is a different thing than currently. I think it's also, a lot of true impressionists come from stand-up backgrounds and not sketch backgrounds, and which is the case with Daryl, which was the case with Jay, and which was the case with Melissa. And the rhythm of sketch acting takes a bit, and I feel like it took Jay 4 or 5 seasons before you can see him in a non impression sketch, and he felt comfortable. He felt like it's part of the show, and I think it's taken Melissa too, because Melissa has such a specific rhythm, and it's interesting, but it doesn't work on a show like SNL that has its own rhythm, where the people who come from sketch backgrounds who can do impressions, but it's not the only thing they can do, like Heidi, like Ego, who studied either at UCB or Groundlings. They're literally trained in the rhythms of SNL sketches, and it's so internalized, so they can hit the ground running. It's like you take like a person like Bowen, who, especially because he's trained so thoroughly, he's very talented, but also because he spent a year writing. So when he started, it was incredibly easy for him to sort of jump in and just be like, I can do these things. I know my strengths. I can write to my strengths. The people that are good writers and good SNL writers, I think, have just tremendous advantages. And if you're coming from a stand-up background, it's so much harder to learn exactly how sketch beats work and what makes a sketch work, unless you're paired with a person who finds you to be their muse. Like, you look at Mikey Day. Like, Mikey Day writes his meal ticket, right? He's just like, he and Streeter could usually write a couple sketches a week, so then he's in a couple sketches a week. Alex Moffat is not writing a couple sketches a week, so you get episodes where you're like, I keep on forgetting that Alex Moffat's around. And that shouldn't be the case in your 5th season. Like, you should be like, and Beck gets all the like bad roles, like Alex, and just because he looks the most like a guy who would have a mustache, I guess. But you do feel bad. Like, you see this Alex Moffat thing and you're like, oh, you forget he's on. And for whatever reason, he just sort of can't fully make space. And like, where like Kyle, Kyle's just doing Kyle. Like, Kyle's like making web content, and sometimes it makes it on the show and it's great, but it's only his thing. Like, he's an island to himself. He's like Fred, who's just like, oh, I'm just going to make my little thing. And sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. But it's, I think Alex hasn't got enough of his things that that you can imagine, that moment that, that when they do the lineup and Lauren will go like, oh, do we have anything for this person this week? Oh, we need more of this, then I can't imagine being like, oh, I guess Alex Moffat's not doing anything this week. Cause like, I don't know what he would be missing.
Yeah, that's the weirdest one for me. Out of like all the analysis we've done for this season and last few years, it's the Kyle stuff, like you said, that I can understand. It's like, if they don't want to put on the Will Forte 10-1 sketch and give that to Kyle, that's their decision. If they, they choose not to just, delve out a bunch of impressions and put Melissa on in those, that's fine. But the Alex stuff, to me, he crushes every single time he's on. And it's just so bizarre that he's not getting more stuff on here. And I would love in maybe we do get somewhat of a purge moving forward into 47. Maybe, eventually that'll get him to that point. I
guess if Beck leaves, if Beck and Kyle leaves, there'll just be space for someone to do more stuff. Clearly there's just going to be so much more female cast members. You assume AD and Kate and Cecily will leave. Seemingly they all want to leave this together. They've also been on the show so long, and their legacy on the show is so clear. And so like, that's why there's, you clearly see them like, we need to get Ego and Heidi to be like stars by the next season. And I think they're proving themselves. But yeah, I think I don't know. Like, I keep on getting there, they'll just not keep Alex around. But because at this point, you should know what an Alex Moffat sketch is, I guess, is what I would say. It's like, oh, Alex, he'll do these things. And I missed that. And I don't know what I'd be. Yeah, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, any of you guys. It's like, when you mix Alex Moffat, besides seeing his face, what type of thing are you imagining?
Eric Trump.
Yeah, that's pretty much his. He's so good at that. It's like his breakout sketch. But I don't know. I see what you mean. Like, when you see Alex, you kind of see him as, he could play like a fratty bro type of guy, like those type of roles. I don't know how often they write sketches with that character in mind, but yeah, I just think, I've also seen him in this movie he was in recently, The Opening Act, and he was really good in that. He's a guy that deserves more sort of opportunity, the more little, shine to show what he can do.
Yeah, and I think he did. He did a film critic, maybe last December. This Terry Fix update, and to me that was like the what I thought was like a really big jumping off point about him getting like his own stuff on, and it was really like it was really great. And it wasn't an impression of Eric Trump, or it wasn't like it was a different thing we were seeing from him, and I was hoping to kind of see more of that as we move forward. But yeah, I do want to touch on one thing, Jesse, since you do kind of have like a little bit of involvement with speaking to cast members and former cast members. Yeah. We're at this point where, like you said, there were some cast members who were probably going to leave in the spring had, the pandemic not happened, and now they want to kind of participate in a normal season. Do you think that, like, what percentage would you give that we're going to lose somebody next week? And if not, do you think we're going to lose, how many people are we going to lose at the end of the year?
So let's think. I mean, like, it would be full circle for Kate to leave on a Kristen episode. I think that'd be nice. And I think it's to Kate's temperament not to make a big thing of it. But I just, it does make me think I'm going to look into it. Like, I will email the rep at SNL and be like, is there any chance that this is Kate's last episode?
That would be a very big deal.
I think I feel like she's having fun, right? She's doing a good job. Like, I think if anything, a lot of the now that we're a little bit away from Trump, I think a lot of that stuff she's been doing, she's having a lot of fun with, in a way that I feel like when she felt so stuck in having to, like, in this cold open makeup, all that stuff that I think dragged on her. But like, that doctor, we know this or whatever. It's not my favorite thing, but it's so clear that she enjoys doing it. It's like fun to see Kate, who's been on the show for so long and clearly so acclaimed at it, so masterful at it, to just like be so loose. To your bigger question, how many people will leave? I feel like earlier this season I did the over under is 8, right, or something like that. It's like you can count it, right? It's like, let's say Kate, Cecily, 80, Beck, Kyle, Pete. That's 6. Colin, Che makes 8, right? So like, I'd say over and under 8 would leave. So maybe 7 or less, or we can take the 9, right? It's like, does Keaton leave? Does Alex Moffat leave? Just because he's not got enough on a roll, but I wouldn't be surprised if 8 people left, which is a lot of people to leave the show.
But it's a huge cast. The cast has gotten so huge, it can happen now.
Yeah, I think so. But also I think part of it will depend on the pandemic and if they feel like they'll have the opportunity to scout in a way that they used to scout. Like I like they got a good amount of cast members. Andrew was already in the orbit, so that wasn't that hard. So, and Lauren had auditioned previous, I believe, if I remember correctly. So like, she's in around, and then Punky, seemingly, it was interesting. Like, right around when it was announced, we were doing a thing at Vulture where we do like the comedians you will and should know, and like a lot of people voted for it. Like, so clearly there was a certain amount of rising tide with that. But if it seems like there's live comedy again by next summer, maybe like they will shuffle people along, be like but if they can't find an easy way to cast, I imagine Lauren leans on people and asking them to stay a little bit longer as like favors.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I do know that a lot of our listeners have asked the question, and I think that the answer to if Kate is leaving next week or not is that the only person who knows that at this current moment, or maybe, it is Monday, so it'd be the start of the week. It's potentially, she would have told people by now, but I think up until this week, the only person who knew that was Kate, if that was the decision that she decided she wanted to make. So it is possible. We will find out in the next few days, but I as far as I understand, I believe she is the only one that is up in the air for this week, but it is possible that we may lose, like you said, 3 or 4 or upwards of 8 people at the end of the year, which would be probably the biggest turnover in the show in about 20 years if they were to do something like that. Darin, let me get your 2 cents on kind of where we're at with the cast going into this mid-season finale.
I mean, as far as the cast goes, yeah, I mean, I think there is a good chance Kate will leave. I think I remember when they were announcing who was hosting the December shows, people saw that, Kristen Wiig was hosting the next one. And somehow people sort of connected, Kristen Wiig's hosting, that means like Kate is definitely leaving on the Kristen Wiig episode. Like I don't know, like it's not a terrible hypothesis, but like I'm still not 100% sold on it. I think there's a good chance she might leave next weekend, but then again, I also think she might want to leave with Cecily and 80 because they all sort of kind of came in together around the same time. So maybe it was like, we came in together, we leave together. But like, 80 hasn't been on the show at all this season because she's out, shooting Shrill. But yeah, like I don't. As far as next week's episode, or this episode coming up this week rather, like yeah, Kate maybe. Everybody else, I don't think is gonna leave until I don't know, maybe the end of the season, like in May, because like Colin Jost has said, like after the election, he'll probably step out. I mean, Che already has his HBO Max show. And it's like you said, like 80 and Cecily have been around for a while. They've done pretty much everything they can do on the show. They don't have anything to prove. So I could see them leaving, at the end of the season.
Yeah, I will add the thing Lauren always says is you have your bridge to whatever you go next. And like Kate obviously does, Cecily has her thing. 80 has already had a thing. So then it's a matter of like when is the right time when you have that thing. The other thing that Lauren said is he seemingly does like having veterans around a little bit more for whatever reason. I think it might be partly a casting thing because there's so many streaming platforms and so many jobs. People are getting cast in shows younger before they like around the time when you're coming up in comedy, the time where you do your SNL audition usually comes however many years, let's say 6 years or something like that. But now people are getting cast 4 years in, so they're not even getting to that point. So I think he likes having veterans around, having them pop in and out, opposed to when you're on the cast, you're on the cast. Like I think they've had success mixing it out. Like Cecily's not there every week, which is a bummer. But when she's there, you can get some key Cecily moments, and it's wonderful. I think they're not against rethinking of how the show is structured, and also the show keeps on being popular, so I guess NBC is allowing them to have the biggest freaking cast on television.
Yeah, Haynes, do you want to touch on that a little bit?
I was just going to say, as far as expectations with Wig coming on, it's a Christmas episode, and so to address the cast members leaving. If I had to put my money on it, I wouldn't bet on any of them leaving next week. Although, we have had people announce it, like during the Christmas episode in 2002, I think, with Al Gore, Jimmy and Lauren are backstage. Jimmy says, "Yeah, I think I'm actually going to leave," and the whole audience kind of like gasped, like they realized it was actually real. I wouldn't. I think that's a little bit more likely than someone actually leaving. That someone like Kate might give us a little bit of a warning first, which I would hope that she does. But it's okay if she just decides to dip out and not say goodbye. As far as expectations for the show, the Christmas show is always fantastic. They just do a great job with getting a fantastic host and musical guest. Anytime you bring back an old cast member, of course, there's, the question, how, what recurring characters are they going to bring back? I'm not a person who's particularly obsessed with any of Kristen Wiig's most famous characters, Target Lady, Gilly. I like them all. I do kind of love Garth and Kat. So I'm actually wondering, with you guys, because especially when someone is as prominent as Kristen Wiig has been returns to the show, it seems like they often have or bring back someone that they have a special connection with. Do you guys envision anyone else popping into the show with her? Maybe Bill Hader for a Californian sketch, or like I just talked about Garth and Kat, maybe Fred slips into the building. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Jesse, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think Fred's most likely because I think he's local, and I feel like it's an easy move to get Fred around. Will is less like Forte is less local, but he'd be great obviously if he came in. and Bill is not. I feel like no one's really flying in the same way for the show. I can't remember. So this is her third time hosting or fourth time?
This is her fourth time.
So like she's probably done all the main ones.
Yeah, I mean the third time they are counting it, but the third time was the at-home one.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I would guess. I would guess so. I mean, like I could see like a Target lady with a mask on.
Yeah.
Like I think that's
like what of her characters makes sense with the pandemic. I mean, I feel like the things that you don't see as much as like I'd like to see her weekend update characters. Like I feel like she's so good. I mean, she was so good at everything. She was like very good at being on the show, but I feel like a lot of her weekend update characters she hasn't been able to do, and it'd be fun if she can do that. But yeah, I think the Target lady with a mask seems like a pretty reasonable thing. I'm trying to think who else could be wearing a mask. The one with the little hands.
Yeah.
Oh,
yes. I blinded, but no. Denise. Is it?
yeah.
Oh,
Denise with the.
and I'm in it. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course. And then, yeah, I mean, like, look, if I had a pick for next week, if I could pick like one Kristen Wiig sketch that I've been asking for years that I would love to see back, and this is dependent on a Sudeikis cameo, but I would love to see two a-holes come back. That is just like one that they just completely dropped at one point that I think is absolutely hilarious. But I would love to see. Jesse, have you ever spoken to Kristen Wiig before?
I have not. She is not a big interviewee. She doesn't love it. So
well, can you just give me your expectations for what you're looking forward to in next week's show?
I think she's great. I mean, like, I think she's really, really good at sketch comedy. I think she's like one of the great sketch comedy actresses ever. I like it when you feel like it's like I think I'm really interested in who are the writers in the show and how they do it and what they do when they get to play with a cast member they've never, it's like a new toy, and it's like, so I'm interested to see, what Anna Dresden and Allison Gates write for her. Now that, Anna wrote like seemingly half this show, like what is Stephen Castillo write now that he's sort of on a roll of writing this sort of weirder stuff? I'd like to see her in a Kyle sketch. Has she done a weird little Kyle sketch?
I don't think so.
I don't know, but I second that.
Just because she could do anything. It's just sort of like, I'll say this is a gonna name droppy story, but it is the person who told me this, which was I was talking to Kristen Schaal about when Kristen Wiig was on Last Man on Earth, and Kristen's like, she's the most precise comedic performer she's ever seen. And I think there is something of just like watching, you just want to see her do all the tricks she can do. She can do everything you want from a person. Like, I think a lot of the cast members we have now are fantastic and so talented and so specific of who they are. But I don't know if we've had a person like Kristen who's just like literally could do all roles SNL ever asked people do at the highest level. And I just like seeing her do it, like do a sketch where she breaks a little bit, do it, but like it's all good. And I wouldn't mind if she sings. I don't mind singing monologues.
Yeah, definitely. Darin, what about you? Any expectations for next week, and what are you thinking?
Well, yeah, I guess I'm with you guys. I mean, I would love to see Kristen Wiig come back with some recurring characters. I really liked, John, your idea with if Sudeikis was game for it, they can come back as two a-holes. Maybe they could modernize it. There'd be like COVID deniers or anti-vaxxers, something like that would be kind of cool. They don't wear masks. Maybe her Judy Grimes character would be good too. Just that nervous, just kidding thing, especially in these times when we're all freaking out over everything. And I mean, as always, because it's the last show of the year, like I'm very much looking forward to the joke swap that Colin Jost and Michael Che do every December. Like I'm always looking forward to see what racist thing Che makes Jost say. That always puts a smile on my face. That's how I celebrate the holidays.
On that note, can I say we did not get to talk about the darkest moment of this most recent episode, and I am kind of a sucker for dark humor, but I don't know if you guys caught this.
Oh, the Texas joke? Or
so good. Love the Texas joke.
No one got that.
No one laughed. It was because it came fast. Maybe it was like people didn't have enough time to process it. But that was a good joke, and that's my like hidden gem, diamond in the rough the episode that no one laughed at, the dark. This thing was so crazy. Only Texas would execute.
Yeah, that joke deserved way more than it got.
Yes,
did you laugh at? I remember reading it. Like it's like a nice set of words, and it's really beautifully constructed. But I do think it lends. It demands you think about the word execute in two different ways, and execute is not like a word a lot of people are like, yes, of course, execute as in murder and execute as in like carry on the plans of or whatever. I think it's like a good math problem joke and not necessarily a joke you could like you should be able to laugh in the moment, but you do have to like really be like, aha, yes.
No, that's the perfect analysis. I think that's exactly what happened, and I got it like half a second later than I would, normally the best type of joke that you immediately explode laughing at. But even though it took me a second, I still think it was a good joke. But yes, I think that's exactly what happened. I think that's exactly what happened.
It's too cerebral.
Yes.
Well, I agree, and I'm really hyped up for next week. As soon as the lineup came out, I knew that we were going to get a killer, mid-season finale. And like I said, I've been really impressed, from reading Jesse's article preseason and just seeing what they've been able to accomplish in these first 8 episodes. I'm really excited for them to go out with a bang next week. So, before I kind of promote what's coming up on SNL Stats, I'm going to go around the panel if you guys want to plug some stuff. So, Darin, where can people reach out to you, and what has been happening on SNL Nerds?
You can always reach out to me on Twitter and Instagram at Darin Credible. That's DARIN Credible. And check out the show I do with my buddy John Trumbull called SNL Nerds. We talk about Saturday Night Live. We break down all the new episodes. We talk about old episodes, talk about SNL history, musical guests, SNL movies, all things Saturday Night Live. You could find us on Twitter at SNL Nerds Show. It's down right there. And we're on the Non-Productive Network, so you can listen to us on non-productive.com, Google Play, Spotify, all the platforms.
Yeah, definitely. And you had a special guest on your latest podcast?
Oh, yeah. We just dropped an episode with Christina Hutchinson of the famous Guys We podcast. She's a huge SNL nerd, so we had her on. She talked about her time as an SNL intern, and she has some juicy stories. So give that a listen. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, everywhere your fine podcasts can be found.
Yeah, and in case you're wondering why this episode has an explicit warning, you can thank Darin.
Sorry. I've been drinking.
It's all good. It's all good.
You made it so far, and then the last minute in the plugs you curse.
Yeah, it's all good. Haynes, what about you? Where can people reach out to you?
People, you can find me on Twitter at SNL Has a Cast. I'm always representing the cast members. I'm not a sucker for celebrity cameos. I love doing this show, and of course I'm all over Reddit. And that's all I'm doing.
Okay, cool. And Jesse, articles, podcasts, you got a lot going on. So tell people where they can reach out to you and read other stuff.
I love celebrity cameos, all celebrity cameo SNL season, the all celebrity cameo version, every episode, every sketch, all celebrity cameos. On social media at Jesse David Fox, Good One Podcast every Tuesday. On Thursday, December 17th at 9 p.m. Eastern, Padma from Top Chef and I have put together a benefit comedy show. It's called Padma Puts on a Virtual Comedy Show for the Georgia runoff election. It will be benefiting Fair Fight. It'll be co-hosted by Saturday Night Live cast member Bowen Yang with Matt Rogers. Saturday Night Live former SNL writer Julio Torres will be there. Former SNL temporary writers when they give famous comedians like a few days to do it. Chelsea Peretti will be there. Kumail Nanjiani. Also, like a lot of famous people: Alicia Keys, Hassan Minhaj, Phoebe Robinson, Sarah Silverman, SNL cast member, Michelle Buteau, Patton Oswalt. It'll be a really, really great show. It's for a good cause. It would mean a lot if people who listen to this watch that show. December 17th, Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern. Padma puts on a virtual comedy show.
Great. And Jesse, thank you so much for joining us. It was really nice to have you on the show tonight. And Darin and Haynes, so happy to have you as well. Make sure everybody to check out everything these guys have plugged for tonight. And I just want to plug something because I'm going to do something a little bit different for this mid-season finale. It is a special show. So first things first, we're going to have our roundtable next week, the same way we always do, coming out on Tuesday. We got a great panel with 3 very special people who are going to come join us, and we're going to break down the mid-season finale. But I'm going to do a second show this week, and that show is going to be, as soon as you're done watching the Kristen Wiig show, head over to the SNL Stats YouTube page, because we're going to be breaking down the show live with a couple of guests right after the show. So if you're all hyped up and you're all excited because the mid-season finale just finished, head over to the SNL Stats YouTube. We're going to be live breaking down the show immediately after, from about 1 a.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern, breaking it all down. So I think that'll be really, really exciting to do. So for anybody to make sure to get all of our shows and never miss one, please, like I said, subscribe on YouTube or on any podcatcher. Check it out. Like I said, we're always looking for your feedback. I know there was a lot of feedback, especially after last week, our discussion of the Morgan Wallen party sketch, which was continued on to this week. Thank you, Haynes. And, we're going to keep talking about everything as we move forward, and then lots to come between the break. I know we got about usually 5 weeks off after next week, so we'll have some fun things planned for the off weeks. Thanks again to our guests, Darin, Haynes, and Jesse David Fox. Really appreciate it. We will see you all next time. Good night and have a pleasant week ahead.